Wow, thank you. Welcome, Trustville First Baptist Church. You know, I've been, for 5 years, I've been all over the Southeast, as far away as New Orleans and up in Kentucky, all over South Carolina, North Carolina. I'm from Georgia, and so I've been all over Georgia. This is my very first visit to Alabama. I don't know what happened, but I'm so glad to be here, and I'm glad you're here. And if you're watching on live stream, wherever you are, we're glad you're here too. Thanks for joining us. Now, we've got a couple of resources for you that will help make this conference even more exciting. Obviously, we're going to do a lot of video, a lot of pictures. We're going to show you the land of the Bible. I'm going to try to connect the dots. I've been leading tours of Israel for about 20 years now, and it's just changed my life, changed the lives of thousands of people. In fact, I would like to know, how many of you have been to Israel? Can I just see a show of hands real quick? Wow, this is a very, very high percentage of people. Here's what the studies show. 1%, maybe if you stretched it, 2% of the people who attend church in America will ever get to the land of the Bible. Very few people are ever going to get to the land of the Bible. It's a long ways away. It's an expensive trip. You have to be physically in good condition. The people have all kinds of reasons for not wanting to go. Maybe they're frightened by things. They don't like to fly. There's so many reasons. But I thought, as I was a pastor for some 27 years, I went to Israel, and I kept thinking as I was there, boy, somebody ought to do something for the 99%. Somehow we need to bring Israel to as many people as possible. And so that's what our ministry is about, Experience Israel Now. It's a long story how it wound up being me, but I'm glad it is, and I'm glad you're here today. Now, we will have 6 different sessions in this conference. We're going to move kind of quick. If you've been to our website and downloaded that resource, you're going to get even more out of this. It's experienceisraelnow.com/Trustville. /Trustville. Can you remember that? Those of you here, you know, /Trustville. There's a downloadable book. It's a study guide we give all of our travelers when they travel in Israel, and it's the whole thing. It's been updated just for this conference, so I hope you'll take advantage of it. We're going to be in the region. This is a picture, by the way, of the Dead Sea. We'll see a lot of different sites that you've heard about, or maybe you've seen them yourselves, or maybe even floated in the Dead Sea. Here's what we're going to do tomorrow, and we'll have 2 sessions today, but I'd like to go ahead and tell you what we're going to do tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to follow Jesus as he leaves Jericho and goes up to Jerusalem, and there's a reason the Bible says up to Jerusalem. No matter which direction you're coming from, you've got to go up in order to get to Jerusalem. And we're going to follow him along the last week of his life. Some important things happen there, and believe it or not, the land has some lessons for us that will transform the way you see these very familiar passages. We'll also be in the second session tomorrow in Jerusalem itself, and we'll look at the last week of the life of Jesus. We'll go to the cross, and I want you to hear something tomorrow. We'll be walking on the Via Dolorosa. I want you to hear something tomorrow the way the people at the cross heard it. The land has a way. The cultural and historical environment of the text has a way of bringing the Bible to life like nothing else. Now, on Wednesday, we'll have 2 more sessions. Christmas is coming up, so we thought we'd do Christmas before we leave. The Christmas story is transformed by the land. Once you see the images that we'll show you, if you've never seen this, and even if you've been to Israel, it's a little overwhelming when you're there. And so we're going to kind of put a package together. This Christmas could be radically different because we spent some time together here. That'll be Wednesday morning, the first session we do. And the second session, why not, let's go to the gates of Hades, or some people call it the gates of hell. We'll go to the gates of Hades, and we're going to tie a knot around everything that we've been talking about, what Jesus said to his followers as they were there. Now, this morning, we'll be down by the Dead Sea. In fact, both of our sessions will have some of these references right around the Dead Sea. And I'd like to talk about going in search of living water. Now, you know Jesus said something about living water. It rings a bell. And some of you are passionate Bible readers, and you know it's in John chapter 4, and that's where we're going to go. And Jesus says, if you'd asked, you could have had living water. And all your lives, all my life, you kind of nod your head and go, yeah, that's just the way Jesus talks. But you know, if somebody came up to you in a grocery store and they saw you looking at a package of bottled water, I was thinking about this last night. I was looking for a case of bottled water, and I was getting it. If somebody walked up to me, one of those salespeople had walked up and said, "Hey, would you like some living water?" I'd have called for security. I don't know about you. But, that lady knew what Jesus was saying, and I'd like to take you to the land to show you what she was saying. Now, as we leave where we are in this beautiful First Baptist Church, and again, thanks to Bob, thanks to our AV staff for making all this possible. It's incredible. Look at the water in America. We have plenty of water. What's missing in the Middle East? They may have oil, but they don't have a lot of water. But when you come down to Israel, you can see that there's just enough water to maintain a population base. And through the centuries, especially in the biblical era, this well-watered piece of land proved to be what I would call an intercontinental highway connecting Africa with Asia and Europe. The Bible story does not take place in the middle of nowhere. It's in the center of the ancient world. Anything that happens in Israel is going to be known in those three continents in a very short period of time because there's water here. There's no water here, and there's salt water there. Now, of course, you could get in a boat and travel, but anyway, Israel is a thoroughfare for three continents, and that's a very important detail to realize that God did this amazing story in the center of the world so that everybody could know. Now, we're going to visit Samaria first. You know about Samaria? People who were Jewish didn't want to go to Samaria. Obviously, Jesus did. He took his disciples. They were very nervous about that. Now, we'll be using Google Earth technology a lot to get there, and then we'll switch over to drone video, and we'll have video on the ground and some photographs and try to show you in a very tight package how the Bible, comes to life. It's better to be there on the ground, and it's better to kind of feel it, the heat of it, to smell it, to meet the people, but here it is. Now, this is Nablus. If you're looking for it today, Nablus, I believe, Nablus, that's in the West Bank. It's a Palestinian community. Biblically, this is Shechem of Abram's time. This is where Jacob put a well. Jacob's well is here. So very, very famous. And Joshua came back with the people after they conquered the southern half of the Promised Land. He brought them back to Shechem and Mount Gerizim on the southern side, Mount Ebal on the northern side. And he had the people stand on the slopes of those two mountains and recite their agreement to agree with God's covenant. And so this has a lot of biblical reference already. When Jesus goes to Sychar, in John chapter 4, it's a village in this same valley. May not be exactly Shechem, may not be right where Jacob's well is, but it might be where this woman was going to Jacob's well. It's all in the same place. It's all right here. Now, as Jesus meets this woman who comes out in the middle of the day, he has a conversation with her. You remember his disciples have gone looking for lunch. Now, this is a traveling group of 13 men, most of them very young, and Jesus sits down at the well, and all 12 disciples go get lunch for 13 people. Now, think about that. If we needed somebody to go get lunch for all of us, we'd simply call up a place, and maybe 2 or 3 of us would go, and we'd bring back the sack lunch, whatever we ordered for all of us. But the disciples were so nervous about being in the wrong place, about being in a place where people look different from them and they talk different from them, and their parents had always said, we just don't go there. They had never been here before. All 12 of them go for security reasons into Shechem, into Sychar to get something to eat, and they will eventually come back and see Jesus and this woman talking. When they are talking, this woman is rude to Jesus. There's a lot of sexism going on. There's racism going on. She's a Samaritan. He's a Jew. He's a man. She's a woman. And these people, these groups of people do not cross. They don't mix. And yet Jesus asked her for a drink of water. He wants to drink. Yeah, I'll drink out of your Samaritan ladle. She never offers him any water. Have you read that story? I mean, she got excited later on, leaves her water jug there, so maybe Jesus uses it and gets the water himself. But there's a lot going on in this story, and she's got so much personal baggage. And you know the story. If you don't know it, it's in John chapter 4. Read it later this afternoon. It'll make more sense having seen the land. he finally breaks through to her after saying, he was tired. It was about noon. It was the middle of the day. Jacob's well was here. This is where we are. We're on top of Mount Gerizim, and this is looking down in the valley. By the way, she's going to say, when she starts talking religious stuff, when she kind of realizes she's in front of a very important holy prophet man, maybe the Messiah, she starts talking about religion, and she says, our ancestors say we need to worship on this mountain. She's talking about these ruins right up here on top of Mount Gerizim. There's worship area up here, and that's where the Samaritans had their historic worship place. And Jesus, and she said, but you say it's in Jerusalem. The point is, Jesus, as he's talking to her, said, if you had asked me, if you knew who was talking to you and had asked, I would have given you living water. And again, that sounds like something to me, having grown up in church and even with the King James Bible a long, long, long times ago, is just, you just kind of nod your head and say, well, that's just the way Jesus talks. But she understood what he meant and says, where are you going to get this living water? And I don't know, until I went to Israel and saw what you can see with the land, I did not understand that they were actually talking about a place, not just one place, but 2 or 3, 4 places in the land where you could get water that was so incredible, people said it was alive. Now, to understand it, we've got to do a little backtracking. So, ancient cisterns are all over Jerusalem and all over Israel where people had to store water. It only rains in Israel in the winter, like November, last half of November, December certainly, January certainly, and then in February you'll get some rain showers. But by March, you can stop carrying an umbrella. It's not going to rain. I mean, you may get a shower or two, but it's not going to rain. And by April, it's really over. Now, they're getting more and more rain in different parts of the country. You can get a shower once in a while. But if you get a shower in the summertime or in the fall, go out and enjoy it. Don't worry about the umbrella, because it'll be hot and the land will be baked to a crisp. Israel's technically a desert. And so it was very important to have their cisterns. Now, you can see the green on this ceiling, right? So it's nice and penicillin covered here. We got lots of mold. And here is a mikvah, actually, but it's representative, I think, of how many people stored water. You just had to dig something and create something so that you could store water because, again, once February, that calendar flips over into March, the water you have stored is going to have to last until November. There will be a few streams around, and if you're fortunate enough to live near the Sea of Galilee, yes, you could have lots of water. But for most of Israel, the water you store is the water you're going to have the rest of the year. And you can see that some of that water stored turns into, well, I just don't want to drink it. And so what you would have to do with water like this is treat it somehow, boil it, turn it into wine, so that it won't make you sick. And there is a lot of wine in the Bible, but there's a practical reason for that. There are water storage areas around. On top of that, you're probably going to have to go to a lot of work to get it. This is Beersheba. You remember Beersheba? Abraham, Sarah, and they lived in Beersheba for a while. And this is the water tunnel of ancient Beersheba. It's amazing what archaeology has uncovered for us in the last 50 years, last 30 years. And can you imagine taking a water jug, probably about 2 gallons, all the way down these steps, all the way down, and you finally get to the water, and it gets lower and lower and lower as the year goes on, and you try to go by the spiders and there's a dead mouse, and you pull it off, and you finally get that water, and you put it back on your shoulder, and you got to come all the way back up these steps. Water is a big deal. You and I use, on average, they tell us 160 gallons of water a day. 160 gallons of water a day. I mean, we play in the water. That's not true in the Middle East. Water's a big deal. And this is the kind of water that almost everybody deals with. The woman at the well up in Samaria, in Sychar, was at her water cistern getting water. She's going after water like this. And Jesus says, if you'd asked, you could have had living water. He's talking about some different kind of water. So let's go find it. In order to find it, need to set up the land. So this is a good place to start. We're all kind of just getting started with this first session. We're going to have 6 sessions all together. So the Benjamin Desert this is the Jordan River leading into the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is the lowest place on earth, a long, long ways down there. And the Benjamin Desert is exactly what you would think it is. But remember, Dead Sea's the lowest place on earth. Jerusalem, 15 miles away, but it's the highest peak in the southern part of Israel. And the Benjamin Desert's on the way. You can see some trees down in the bottom. That means there's a water source down there. Indeed, there is a small stream down there. You would not think of it as a river. They did. But nevertheless, there's a small water source down there. And that's the road that led, because of the water, from Jericho up to Jerusalem. We'll be taking a better look at that tomorrow morning. I'll show you the inside look at that. But this is the Benjamin Desert. And then below the Benjamin Desert begins the Judean wilderness. And below the Judean wilderness is the Negev Desert. And we're talking about 50% of the land of Israel, both modern day and in ancient Israel. Most of Israel is a desert. Most of Israel was desperately lacking for fresh, drinkable water. And you look at the Negev Desert and you see this Mitzramon here. This is the wilderness wandering area. This is where the people, that Moses led out of Egypt, they wandered for 40 years in this land. There is no swimming pool. There is no running river down here. There are tiny little holes that might have some water. This is just a desperate kind of fix. And this goes on for about 140 miles from the bottom of Israel, the most southernmost tip, down by the Red Sea, all the way up to the I guess where Jericho is in the Judean wilderness. And it's just spectacular in its barren nature. And it can be very, very hot. It can also be very cold there in certain parts of the year. But the point is, as you're driving and if you go over there in a rental car or you're on a tour bus sometime and you go past this land, it's just rugged land, and you go over the hill and it's more rugged land and there's no water. And you get up here in the Judean wilderness, where the water from Jerusalem and Bethlehem has created these great crevices that go down to the Dead Sea, and that's part of the Dead Sea there in the top of this image. When you're there and you see the rugged nature of the wilderness, there are no running streams here. But when it rains in Jerusalem, flash floods will develop, and naturally, since that's the highest ridge in Israel and the Dead Sea is the lowest place on earth, the water is going to have a lot of flash floods. And over the years, it has carved out these great canyons, and they're all dry, except for one. In a span of about 140 miles, there is only one crack in all of these canyons that has any water in it. And if you're a Bible reader, you've read about it, but until you spend a full day driving in this area or hiking in this area, you don't really appreciate what you find. I mean, we've got so much water around us, we play in the water. We have swimming pools, we have water parks, we can leave the water running, we don't worry about it. Not here. Every drop is precious. Every drop is precious. Now, if you swing around in the Dead Sea and you see all these different canyons, if you follow this canyon and that canyon, they really kind of are the same one, you're going to find a water source. And in 140 miles north to south, this is the only place where you'll find a water source. This is En Gedi. You've read about En Gedi if you've read the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures. David hid from Saul at En Gedi, and it's not hard to see why, because there's water down here. As a shepherd from Bethlehem, it's only about 15 miles from here to Bethlehem, 15 miles from here to Jerusalem, but this is the bottom of the world, and Jerusalem's way up there on the ridge, and there's so many cracks and canyons you could hide so easily. But out of the rock comes a water source. This is En Gedi. This water was so fresh, so never-ending, so cold, so wonderful, they called it Mayim Haim, which means living water. If you had asked, you could have had living water, Jesus said. Where are you going to get this Mayim Haim? No living water around here. Jesus says, I am that living water. Remember, we're talking to this woman up in Samaria. She's a long ways away from here. What is Mayim Haim? Well, it's pure, it's clean, it's been filtered. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this water. You can drink it with no fear, cold and refreshing, and it never stops. If you find yourself hiding in En-Gedi like David did, you can go swimming, you can sit under the waterfalls, you can let it massage your shoulders. It is a wonderful, 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 wonderful place to find, as long as you actually find it. You know, we live in a culture that says any way you want to get to God is fine. I mean, all roads lead to heaven, and so nobody wants to offend anybody. But Jesus said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. That's incredibly offensive to people who don't want to follow Jesus. And there's been a clash ever since then. But I want to tell you something about the living water of En-Gedi. There's 140 miles from north to south in the Benjamin Desert, the Judean wilderness, and in the Negev Desert. And after that, it's the Red Sea, so that's salt water. That's not going to help you. The Dead Sea is right there. That's really salty water, the saltiest water on earth. That's not going to help you. The only living water, the only fresh water in all of that stretch is right here at En-Gedi. And so if you think all roads lead to heaven, all roads lead to the right answer, Jesus is going to use living water. This is water that's alive, it's fresh, it's Mayim Haim, you know, as an example of who He is. You can try all of those other ways, but the truth is, you better know which canyon crack to go in, right? Because if you get down there by the Dead Sea, and the Dead Sea's 8 times saltier than normal salt water, you know, you drink that, you're going to die. You just get thirstier and thirstier. I mean, seriously, it'll kill you. And then you're looking at 140 miles of canyons and desert. And one of these cracks is going to lead to life-giving water. It reminds me of the day Jesus said, I am the way, I am the life, I am the truth. No one comes to the Father except by me. And you can choose to either say, wow, that's offensive, or you can say, hey, thank you for telling me the truth. I need that water. I need that living water. And I'm in a wilderness, and if I follow any of these canyons, I don't want to just take a pick, because I tell you the truth, if you get a day into a hike and you chose the wrong canyon, you're going to be in a fight for your life before the sun goes down. You better know which canyon leads to living water, right? Just kind of makes sense. And Jesus uses this as an example of how to have a relationship with God. And He said, it comes through me. I am the way, I am the life, I am the truth. No one comes to the Father except by me. You know, I tell you what we're going to do. We're kind of going to put a pause button on this right now. We've got another session in a little while. And we also, Bob tells me we're going to entertain some questions, and I'll make up some answers to go with that. And say it very confidently, so maybe you'll know it's the truth. You know, but, you know, think about it. This is really, really an important place to start. It's the kind of the beginning point and the ending point. This amazing image of the Judean wilderness. One of the cracks of the canyon has living water in it, and only one. You can go be refreshed by the waters of En-Gedi only if you know the way to En-Gedi. David knew the way to En-Gedi. He hid from Saul at En-Gedi. And Saul took his soldiers down there. He knew David would be there because that's where the fresh water is. And so they're hunting for him. But it's kind of hard to find. This is a maze. One person could get lost in there and hide from an entire army as long as he wants. And that's exactly what David and the handful of men he had around him did when they were hiding from Saul. So the idea is, do you know which one of these canyons leads to life? because you're on that journey. And Jesus said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. And then Getty, he said to this woman in Samaria, if you knew who was talking to you, you would have known. You could have had living water. You could have had Mayim Haim, and she knows exactly what he's talking about. And he said, I'm the way. And she got so excited, she left her water jug by the well, which I imagine Jesus used to get a drink. He was still thirsty. And she goes and she tells everybody in town, and they come back, and the disciples are there. And by the time they leave, it's an amazing, wonderful weekend experience where these disciples have learned that Jesus has come not just for Jewish people, but for Gentiles. And that means me and you probably in this room. And if you're watching at home, that's us. It's inclusive of us. It's inclusive of everybody. And it's an amazing story. And that's how the land has secrets for us hiding in plain sight, and that's what my ministry is all about. So I'm glad we're getting started. We're going to take a break. We will take 10-minute breaks, and then we'll come back for a second session. Now, if you're watching online, you just kind of hang on, take a break with us. There'll be a countdown clock going on in just a minute, and then we'll get started again with the second session. And I am so glad that you're all with us. So what are you? You glad you're here today? Yeah, what a good Monday morning. What a good Monday morning. So let's take 10 minutes, and we'll be back with session number 2.